Between naive optimism and absolute pessimism, Viktor Frankl identified a third possibility. He called it tragic optimism. The term first appeared in a postscript to the 1984 edition of Man's Search for Meaning, written when Frankl was almost 80. It was his answer to a question that had pursued him throughout his career. How can one say yes to life, knowing what we know about what life contains? Naive optimism denies the tragic. It insists that everything happens for a reason, that suffering will always be redeemed, that the universe is fundamentally benevolent. Frankl found this position evasive. He had seen too much. The mother whose child has been murdered, the survivor of the camps who returns to find every member of her family gone, the patient dying slowly of a disease no one chose. These people are not consoled by the suggestion that their suffering serves some higher purpose. They are insulted by it. Naive optimism, when offered to the suffering, becomes a form of cruelty. Absolute pessimism is the opposite move. It accepts the reality of suffering and concludes that life has no meaning, that nothing matters, that the only honest position is despair. Frankl found this position equally inadequate. He had observed, in himself and in his patients, that despair was not a stable resting place. It collapsed into either dissociation or self-destruction. And it failed to explain the central empirical fact of his own life, that in the camps, even there, some men maintained inner meaning. Between these two positions, Frankl proposed tragic optimism, the capacity to say yes to life despite the tragic. The yes is not naive. It does not deny that suffering is real, that guilt is real, that death is real. The yes is made in full sight of all three. But the yes is also not defeated. It refuses to grant the tragic the last word. What makes this possible? Frankl identified three pivots. First, even from suffering, meaning can be drawn. Not always, not automatically, and not from suffering that one inflicts on oneself. But the suffering one cannot avoid can be born in a way that itself realizes a value. Frankl's attitudinal values. The patient who faces terminal illness with grace, with love for those around her, with truthfulness about her fear, realizes a meaning that the avoidance of suffering could not. The way one bears the unbearable is itself a form of meaning. Second, from guilt, the possibility of change. The person who carries genuine guilt has access to a form of inner movement unavailable to the self-righteous. The recognition that one has caused harm, really caused it, not symbolically, opens the door to repair, to amends, to becoming someone who will not repeat the act. Guilt taken seriously is not destructive. It is moral data that can guide transformation. Frankl had immense respect for the patients who came to him able to feel their own moral debt. Third, from the transitoriness of life, the urgency of action. If we lived forever, nothing would need to be done. The finitude of our existence is precisely what gives each act its weight. Death is not the enemy of meaning. It is the condition that makes meaning possible. The person who lives as if today might be their last is, paradoxically, more alive than the one who assumes endless time. Tragic optimism, then, is the stance that says, yes, suffering. Yes, guilt. Yes, death. And, within and through these, yes, meaning is still possible. Yes, my action still matters. Yes, my life is worth living. This is not natural. Frankl never claimed it was. He saw it as a stance, a chosen orientation, a discipline. He believed it had to be practiced and that the practice could be taught. The patients who acquired it did not become happier in the simple sense. They became more capable of bearing what life sent them without losing the will to meet it. In the postscript where he named the term, Frankl summarized it with a phrase that became famous: the ability to say yes to life in spite of everything. Everything is everything. The camps, the losses, the failures, the bodies that fail and the loves that end and the truths that wound. Saying yes does not mean approving. It means choosing, in full awareness, to remain a participant. Frankl was 80 when he wrote this. He had seen the worst the 20th century could offer. He was still saying yes.